I'm so glad you joined me here today at the Akronist. I have with me a great guest. He is head over our missions and outreach department. He oversees our multimedia department and security. And he is the director of our sports ministry. I'm talking about no other than Pastor Jimmy Taylor, staff pastor of the House of the Lord Church. Welcome, Pastor Taylor.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate being here.
I am glad that you're here. Pastor Taylor is a very unique gentleman. I've known him for several years, and as director of sports ministry, one of the things he's involved in is bringing the United Nations to our church. I want him to explain that.
Well, basically what we have is a Thursday night table tennis program. Thursday and Saturday nights we bring, it's sort of build and come. Build and they will come. Back in the 1970s, the United States had a ping pong diplomacy program in which we put together a table tennis team and sent them to China, and it opened up diplomacy with respect to the United States and China. So what we have at the House of Lords is we have a multiplicity of different ethnicities coming to play table tennis. The catalyst is table tennis. On that event, on that night, we have some Indians, people from India, Nigerians, Chinese, Sri Lanka. So we're excited about the outreach. It's sort of a unique way of reaching all these places without having to leave the region.
So it sounds like you're using sports to reach the nations, and you're involved in something locally called Let's Turn It Around. Please explain.
Exactly. We're excited about a program coming up on June 20th in which we're going to try to address some of the problems that we're having with respect to law enforcement and in the community. So what we plan to have on that day, on June 20th, starting at 1 o'clock, is we're going to have three basketball games. Basically, they're made up of 4 teams, and there'll be 5 law enforcement officers and 5 people from the community on each team, and they'll be playing against one another, and we'll have a championship. It will consummate to a championship game at 3 o'clock on that day. So we're quite excited about that. Chief Nice and Bishop Johnson from the House of the Lord will be our featured speakers at halftime. There'll be plenty of fun and gifts and three-point contests and a lot of other things. Larry Nance, Drew Joyce, Jimmy Oliver are some of the noted guests that are going to be there as well.
So, Pastor Taylor, it sounds like that God has given you a missions heart. Is that what's prompting this? Tell me about the genesis of it.
Well, the beginning of this is that, I have a cliche that inaction is action. And we can sit back and criticize or go out and do various things. I thought we'd take a positive route in terms of trying to address some of these issues. And it stems from the fact that I believe that it's lack of relationship. I think if people get to know each other and humanize one another, the encountership that they have when we have incidences will be quite different. So in terms of playing, this is not a panacea. It's not going to solve the entire problem. But hopefully, if we fast forward down the line, and some of these police officers have encounters with some of the guys that are playing basketball with, I think the encountership is going to be different. And so our goal is to build relationships.
Build relationships.
Yes.
How can sports help build relationships?
Well, I think that sports, armed services, education are 3 catalysts by which people get a chance to know people for who they really are. When you're playing on the same sports team and you have a common goal, for example, the playoffs now, and we hope the Cavaliers do well, of course.
Yes.
But I think that transcends race. If you're trying to win a championship, you really don't care what ethnicity or what race or where a person comes from. You have a common goal. So this is an initiative to try to get them with a common goal to win the basketball game. And so hopefully it'll build relationships.
Is that what you found the case on your Thursday nights with the ping pong tennis?
Absolutely. We've had encounters where we've had long conversations, and even though we have different philosophies and different religions and things of that nature, just by playing the sport of table tennis, it's been the catalyst to drive us all to one central point, and we have discussions, and it's not combative or adversarial. And I think that's the good news.
That's outstanding. What is your goal? What do you want to see happen on that day? The community to come out, they play the games, and then what?
Well, exactly. Again, this is a genesis. This is the beginning. This is the first step. So on the way there, we're hoping that the law enforcement officers and the community will have a couple practices. They'll get a chance to know each other. They'll go out for hamburgers. They'll go out. So now they get a chance to humanize each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I think to turn this thing around, you have to put a different face on the subject. So if people from the community can see the law enforcement officers in a basketball uniform shooting a three-pointer, I think he's going to see the law officer different than holding a gun or a taser. So I want to change the imagery of each respective subject that we're talking about. So what I'd like to see is for people to come out and participate and enjoy. There'll be plenty of halftime gifts and prizes, and so we have a lot of exciting things planned for that day.
And so we're talking about hand-picked police officers and hand-picked people from the community. How did you get your players?
Well, that's a great question. What we've done is we do want to single out some people, but it's pretty much open. In a perfect world, I'd love to have, let's say, people from the community who would have a high degree of likelihood who would have an encounter with a police officer. I mean, I can't predict that because anybody might have an encountership with the police law enforcement officers. But whoever has that encounter, I'd like for it to be positive, and that's what we'd like to turn around. It's a throwback to the old days when the police officers and cops used to walk the beat and they knew the people in the community.
Right.
So it's an effort to move in that direction.
So after this game, how are you going to follow up? What's going to happen? There's going to be another game. What do you see?
Excellent question. I think right now the plan is this is the first game. How we're going to morph. We've been talking to some of the council people in terms of Russ Neal, in terms of coordinating this with the Midnight Basketball League. They have some funding there, and we're hoping to dovetail this into that. And of course, law enforcement officers will need them for security and other things, even if they don't play. So I just think the atmosphere, we're trying to shift the atmosphere. If I had to answer you on a question, if we can turn the perceptions around and turn the way people view each other around, I think that's a good start.
Have your past encounters with law enforcement been positive in light of you're over security at the House of the Lord, and you're an African American? Tell me about your own personal history there.
Well, I think to be fair, I think, since I know a lot of officers here of late, my encounters have been all pretty much positive because I know them and I say, hey, I throw the I'm Pastor Taylor card out, and that seems to get me something. But on average, I just think that there's biases. Bishop Johnson at the House of the Lord is teaching about implicit biases, and we all have them. So I've encountered that over the years. Call it profiling, call it whatever you want to call it, and I don't know if it's intentional, and I'm not trying to blame, and that's what this basketball game is all about. There's plenty of negative and rioting and all that type of thing. I'm trying to present it from the positive. But from my own perspective, I think most African American men in particular have incidences where they can go back over their lives and where they've been victimized or profiled or whatever. And at this point in my life, I don't hold intentions. I try to look at the big picture. Police officers have a difficult job.
Yes, they do.
We just had a simulation at our church. They had simulators there, and they put us in the position of having to make decisions.
Yes.
Tough choice.
Tough.
You don't have a lot of time, and so it's easy to second guess them on Monday morning and say what they should have done.
Exactly.
But it was quite insightful for me. So there's an argument to be made on both sides. A number of calls that come into the Akron area are predominantly an African American community. That's a fact. These are statistical data that's been arrived. The other thing I'll give you, in just from my perspective.
Okay, what I want you to, in our remaining minutes, give me your perspective or seconds, and look in that camera and leave us with what you want us to have and remember.
What I'd like for the community to remember is that we should show ourselves as an example of love, of purity, and our conduct, and that we respect officers. The law enforcement officers, for the most part, are good people. They're people just like us. They want to do their job. They want to provide protection, service, and go home at the end of the day. So if I had one parting shot, it would be that in the eventuality that the law enforcement and the community do have an encounter, that both are able to go home safely.
Exactly. Now, I'm glad to have you here today at the
Well, thank you
Akronist.
so much for having me.
Thank you for using sports to help minister to people all around this world.
My pleasure.